What's up guys, hope you're all doing good. So for today's video I thought I would just take you through one of my older photo shoots. It was my sister's birthday a couple of years ago. We went to a hotel for her birthday and I did a photo shoot for them on a car park. And as I was editing my pictures not too long ago, I was realising that my edit changes within the same photo shoot from the start to the end. The photos look quite different. So I wanted to see what would they look like if I went back and edited a photo shoot from a couple of years ago. So I thought that would be useful for you guys to see, and you guys might like to see just how much an edit can change over time. And then it was my mum's birthday over the weekend as well. So I went back home and there were a couple of football matches that I went to watch. So I added a couple of montages of them so you guys can just get an insight as to what I did on my weekend. So the first thing I do when I go to edit my pictures is obviously open up Lightroom. I personally choose to use Lightroom. I just find it very simple and easy to work with. As you can see, I've loaded in and imported all of the photos. I personally like to use collections just to kind of sort through all of my photos. I find it just helps me keep track of things. Any picture or any photo shoot I want to go through, I can just come back and know they're going to be here somewhere. Then obviously on my other computer I've got all the other photo shoots that I've done in the past. But today we're going to be working on my sister's birthday. This was her, I think it was her 18th or 17th birthday, one of her birthdays. So I was helping her get some pictures. So I thought, let me go through one of my older photo shoots and see how my editing style has changed. So I personally like to use flags for my photos. Let me just make sure everything is unflagged. There we go. So I just come in here, and then one thing I really like about Lightroom is you just hit X and you hit P. So X is to unflag or to reject a photo, and P is to flag a photo as one that you've picked. And one other amazing thing is, if you didn't know, if you hit caps lock, it will automatically go to the next photo for you and just make these bigger edits so much faster. So here I hit caps lock. When I hit X, it automatically goes to the next photo, and it means I can get through this so much quicker just hitting XP as I see them, if I like them or if I don't like them. And then from there, I will now come into my grid view, hit flagged, and I can see all the pictures that I've liked. And these are now the pictures that will go on to edit. Rather than me editing more pictures than I need to, I can only edit the pictures that I actually like and the pictures that I will eventually send off to the client. With all of my flagging, and as you can see, a good thing here is I can see the pictures that are unflagged, so I can quickly come through and just go through these and see if there are any here that I've missed that maybe I might want to keep instead. Okay, here we go. So that's all the pictures flagged, and I'll come here, and I personally have a couple of presets that I use just to get myself started on different photo shoots. And of course, not each of these is going to work with the photo, but I quite like the way this neutral one looks. It's in the name, it's quite neutral. However, it is a bit warm. So if I now come to my loop deck, there's a temperature dial here which I can now use, and as you can see, the temperature is changing on the screen. So a lot of the work has been done for me, to be honest, before and after. But I can now come in and make any picture specific adjustments, because the profile or the preset, it helps you some amount, but it will not edit the picture for you. So you need to come in and just make sure that the picture, you're happy with the picture, how it looks. And of course that is a process, and it changes for every photo. So even if I come here, I copy the settings from this photo and I paste them on this one, they might work, but there might be some things I want to tweak. Maybe I don't want as much shadow in it, maybe I want to drop those shadows. And then of course the crop is going to be different for all of these photos. So it's not as simple as just copy and pasting the settings from one photo to another. There's a lot more that has to go into it in terms of making sure each photo is how you want, because obviously you're going to deliver these photos to a client and you don't know what they're looking for. They might have an idea that they want from their photos, and you've got to be able to make sure that they can pick any one of these photos that you've given them and use that to communicate whatever it is that they want to communicate through the photos you've taken for them. I can't lie, I completely forgot to turn on my microphone for this section, but I was just talking about how I've gone through all the photos, and now it's time to just compare them basically. But before I do that, I'm going to get something to eat, I'm going to make some food, and then we're going to get into comparing the photos from a couple of years ago to now. finally time to actually go through these pictures for real now. So I've got all of them up on my laptop here. You can see in the top corner I've got my camera settings and then the focal length that I used. I was using the 24-105 for this photo shoot, and to me the only reason I used that is because I didn't have the 85 with me at the time. I hadn't bought that yet. But if I was to go back and kind of redo this shoot again in real life, I would definitely use the 85 because I personally prefer the look of the 85. I prefer the feel that it gives you in your pictures. So that's definitely what I'd have used for portraits like this if I was to reshoot them. So going to the photos, I think for me the first thing that stands out in this photo is if you look at the face, there's much less contrast in this re-edited one. So I'm going to try and keep the re-edited one on the right and keep the older one on the left. I think there are a couple of them where it's not quite like that, but I'll try and do that as much as I can. But yeah, so over on the right hand side over here, you can see there's a bit less contrast in the hair. The image is a bit flatter, but for me personally, I think this works because as an overall image, you kind of get more detail. And for me, in this image, the contrast is a bit distracting because there's just so much shadow. Her hair is so much darker compared to the highlights on her face. So I think the flatter image for me was a bit better. And then, I don't know if you guys can tell, but it's almost like this background's a bit less sharpened. And even though there's no difference in the sharpening, it's just because of the amount of contrast that was in this previous photo. It just kind of looks a bit sharper, it looks a bit more artificially sharpened compared to this one that looks slightly more natural. And moving on to the next photo, this one the difference is quite large. When I looked at this photo, I was like, why would I edit a photo to look like this? Why would I make it look like that in the first place? But I guess that's one of the things you learn as you go on. So to me, this looks almost like the kind of picture you get on your phone. And what I mean by that is there's so much done in post-processing to kind of increase your dynamic range or increase the range between your highlights and your shadows. So if you can see over here, if you look, it's especially noticeable in the sky. First of all, the color of the sky is a bit different. I tweaked the colors, tweaked the blue, made it a bit of a lighter blue rather than a darker blue. Then you can also see how there's much fewer highlights, or the highlights aren't as obvious in the first bit, or in the, what am I trying to say? The highlights in this one are much more prominent because the sky is bright, the sun's bright, it was a bright sunny day. So I don't really like how in this picture I've kind of taken down the exposure, I've kind of taken down the highlights all the way down because it's not conveying that it was a really sunny day. All you're seeing is the shadows. But in the re-edited one, you can see how the highlights are still there. You can still tell it was a sunny day, but you don't get this overly contrasty look that you got when I first edited these pictures. And another thing that's quite obviously different is the colors. First of all, I think the colors are a bit more prominent in this because it's a brighter image. You can do more with the colors. But then I also warmed it up slightly just to, again, show that it was a warm, sunny day. And then there's, of course, like I said before, the slight color change in the sky. So moving on to the next photo, this one's a bit more of the same. It's not quite as obvious, but again, the highlights, I just tried to increase the highlights a bit, just convey that it was a sunny day. If you look at her arm over here, on this one, if you were to take this by itself, this would be better exposed, but as a whole image, we really want to convey that the sun was shining down, the sun was like facing her. So I left those highlights in there on the t-shirt. There are a couple bits on the t-shirt. It's not as, you can't see as many details in the t-shirt, but that's all. That's what you want. You want to be able to convey what the environment was showing. Some people might prefer this picture, but me personally, I prefer the one on the right, the re-edited one. Oops. And then going on to the next one. Again, it's just a bit more of the same. It's just controlling the highlights slightly differently. I think before I used to be so scared of highlights, so scared of things being blown out. So I just always did whatever I could to, you know, get rid of the highlights. But what you can see here is, if you look in the shadows especially, there's quite a lot of detail in the shadows in this picture. You can see quite a lot of the shadow. Whereas in this one, there's much less that you can see. So how I did that, I just reduced the contrast a bit, reduced the shadows a bit, because you're not meant to be seeing what's in the picture. In this, you can see the CP, you can see the lines, you can see everything in the background. It can be just a little bit distracting sometimes. So I came and I just edited it slightly differently to hide them without going in and masking these things. I've been able to just hide them a bit more, and then again we get a slightly flatter image, slightly less contrasty, and in my opinion that does look a little bit better. On to the next one. Again, more of the same, just again showing those highlights. Don't be afraid to show your highlights in your photography, because I think sometimes when you first start out, if you see some really low shadows or some crushed shadows or some overexposed highlights, we're very quick to, you know, drag the highlight slider all the way down or drag the shadow slider all the way up to kind of compensate for that. And what I feel that gives you pictures that look very much like they're taken on a phone. They don't look very professional because your phone, it will automatically, you know, try and get the best exposure for every part of the image, whereas sometimes that's not that's not how your eyes see. So you're just trying to capture it how your eyes see it again. So on to the next one. This one, the difference is very, very subtle. It's not much of a difference, to be honest, but again, you can see the slight color difference in the ground over here. The greens are slightly different. That's just from warming up the picture a bit. You end up with slightly different shades of green. And then again, just on the face, slightly more highlights, but this one, nothing too much different. On to the next one here. This one again is quite different. So this one, she's facing a slightly different way. So the sun isn't directly on her. And I'm pretty sure there were a couple of clouds passing over as well. But all I can see in this one is that her face just looks very underexposed. It's very dark. Doesn't look very bright. So I've kind of brightened up her face a bit, kind of just showing. And then if you look around the arms here, on this original one on the left, you can see there's a very sharp line. Whereas in reality, it looks a lot more like this, where the line isn't as sharp and crisp, because of course you've got the shadows in the background, which will kind of blur the lines with how bright they are. So I just, you know, brighten the picture up a bit. So all I've really done in this is, again, change the colors only slightly, brightened up the picture a bit, and then that's that. And again here, very much the same thing. This one, I'm looking back now, like, how did I not realize this was so underexposed? But I'm looking at this and thinking this needs to be way brighter. So I've gone and brightened this up. But the thing is, when I was editing these pictures, I didn't have them side by side. So these edits were done completely separately from each other. So this is just how over time my editing style has changed. I'm not afraid to, you know, make an image a bit brighter. If there are a couple overexposed bits in your image, there are a couple overexposed bits in your image. But that's nothing that you can't, like, it's not going to ruin your image if there are a couple bits that are overexposed. Whereas in this earlier image, because I was trying so hard to, you know, expose for the sky and make sure that the sky wasn't overexposed, it's ended up crushing her. Well, not completely crushing, but the subject of the photo is definitely underexposed, which is not what you want. So on to the next one. Again, more of the same thing, just kind of in the sky, again, changing of color. The picture's slightly warmer. And then this one is slightly different composition. I've left less negative space on her left hand side. Just moved her to the center of the frame a little bit more. And then if you can see in the face, there's a bit less contrast, a bit less sharpness. So I think this looks like there was a bit of texture in, so the textural clarity slider on her face. And I personally don't think that looks the best on people. It's not the most flattering. So I removed all of that, gave you much, it's almost softer, but it's a more natural look to the picture. Over here, again, just coming in, brightening up the image a bit, and making sure the image isn't as underexposed so you can see everything in the image properly. And then we've got a couple more here. This one, again, more of the same thing. And one thing I realized when I was going through these pictures just to compare them is that the tilt or the rotation of this photo isn't right. The picture isn't straight. So you can see that this line is nowhere near straight. So when I went and re-edited, I went and straightened this up. And I think this is just things that before I would have overlooked, but now that I've been doing this for a lot longer, it's kind of natural. As I'm going through, there's a whole process where I go and I crop the photo, I rotate it, make sure it's rotated right. Whereas before, maybe I didn't do that. That's why these pictures where the rotation is slightly off, that's why they're making their way through into the final edits. And then the last one, again, just the shadows, making sure the contrast isn't too high, not being too afraid of having a slightly brighter image. thank you guys for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I hope there's something that you can take away from this, and just know that your edit doesn't have to stay the same over your photography journey. It's gonna change, and there's nothing wrong with that. As you can see from my pictures, it's definitely changed quite a bit. And again, don't be scared of overexposed highlights. Don't be scared of overexposed images. Sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes that's the look that you want to go for. But thank you for your patience. This video did take a while to come out. I've been so busy with photography, videography, uni work, all of that stuff. I'm finally on top of that, finally got around to editing this video. But don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.